Hey, friends, welcome to Discovering the Lutheran Faith. Today, we're going to be on session 3. We're going to be looking at the Apostles' Creed, part 1. This, again, just this overview of the first part of the Creed, what it means to believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. And in this session, we're going to look at what is the key to understanding how God actually created all things. Now, in last session, we talked about the power that God used to create all things. He did it by his word. God spoke creation into existence. He said, let there be light, and there was light. Let there be darkness, there was darkness. Let there be the suns and the moons and the stars, and they were. Let the earth be formed. Let the dry ground come about. Let the waters teem. Let the plants and vegetation, all of that you read in that beautiful account in Genesis chapter 1 and in Genesis chapter 2. Now, what happens, though, is we look at the Bible, and the Bible tells this beautiful story of how God created all things. But the Bible is not a scientific textbook, right? The Bible is not meant to give us every rationale by which things occur. And so as Christians, sometimes we find ourselves kind of in this tension between faith and science. And how do the two relate to one another? Science attempts to answer the question of how. Faith answers the question why. They're two different questions. And so it's important to kind of keep those questions separate. I believe that faith and science do not have to be at odds with one another. I don't believe that faith and science have to compete against one another. I actually believe much of science proves, not maybe proves isn't the right word, but affirms what we already know to be true as followers of Jesus. And so if this is something you wrestle with, let me encourage you. I actually did a sermon on this about 2 years ago. It's on our YouTube channel, Good Shepherd Gardendale, and it's in a series that I did called Doubting God. And in that series, we looked at the question, can I believe in God and science? Right? Can I affirm these two things without always having to be in contradiction to one another? So if this is something you wrestle with, feel free to check that message out. I think it would be really helpful. Okay. Now, when we talk about creation, one of the things we need to understand is this. The key to understanding the origin of all things is faith, right? And so when we talk about affirming in the creed, I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, it takes faith in order to confess that truth, all right? Because here's what we know. It's impossible to scientifically prove either that God created the world or that it evolved, right? And so these are the competing theories, different forms of evolution and how those things, the Big Bang Theory, and how things kind of evolved over billions of years, or did God create things? And there's kind of this tension out there between these two things. And one of the things that I know to be true, and I learned in high school, is you cannot scientifically prove something if you can't reproduce it. And so there is a limit to science, just as that, and that limit reminds us that I can't prove to you that God created the heavens and earth, and you can't prove to me that evolution created heaven and earth, because I can't reproduce either one of them. We often forget that evolution is a theory, and it's not a scientific fact. As Christians, we reject any teaching, theory, or belief that would deny the existence and role of God as creators. All right, that at the bottom's kind of cut off there a little bit, but we would deny the existence and the role of God. We would deny any theory or belief or teaching, right, that would deny the existence and role of God as creator. What I mean by that is, I think there's freedom within the Christian realm of thought that we can explore different ideas about how we think the existence of the universe came about and the process that God used to create all things and bring all things into existence. And we can have conversations about that. There are some people who are called theistic evolutionists. It's not something I necessarily gravitate towards, but it's out there, and so people wrestle with that concept. But the key is this: as people who affirm the Apostles' Creed, right, that God is the maker of heaven and earth, I can't go down a path that would then take God out of the equation, that would say God is not a part of how the world and the universe was created. See, either we believe that God created all things, or we believe that everything evolved from nothing, but we can't affirm both of those. We can't keep those side by side. That any theory or concept that would take God out of the equation, then we would have to reject. Now, the Bible tells us that faith is this gift of God that is absolutely necessary in order to believe that God created heaven and earth and all things. This is what Hebrews chapter 11, verse 3 says. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible, right? Faith helps us to grab a hold of something that is so far beyond our comprehension. Now, I want to introduce you to an author. There's a gentleman by the name of Lee Strobel, and he wrote a wonderful book called The Case for Creator. And looking at the evidence in research and history and science that points towards a creator God. What's fascinating about Lee's story was when he was a high school junior, he was taught the theory of evolution. And in that theory, God was nowhere to be found within the understanding and the realm of creation. And Lee's conclusion in that high school biology class or whatever class he was learning it, science class, was if I don't need God as creator, then I don't need God as all. And so then he turned away from the Christian faith, became an atheist, staunch atheist, and lived a life without God for many years. And it is only through the graciousness and kindness of his wife and a wonderful church that Lee came to faith as he began to explore the truth claims of Christianity. And so he wrote this beautiful book called The Case for Creator. So if you want to explore this topic deeper, I highly encourage you to do so. Okay, friends, come back for the next session, question number 8, as we explore how do angels fit into God's creation.